Hey, how's everybody doing? This is our second installment of the Core Values podcast. Today, we are here to hear another story. All we want to do is just provide that platform for people to kind of just talk about something that other people can relate to. And we're trying to touch hearts that have a large, exterior and wall. So first, I want to introduce my guest. My guest is Emma Collard. She is a former United States Army service member, and she is very active in the community. I want her to kind of elaborate for that, but I just want everybody to know that we are greatly appreciative to have somebody of such high, has a lot of weight in this community that we're talking about. So we're gonna get more into it. So Emma.
I'm excited to be here, and I loved the pun with the such high something, because it's true, being in this industry, you kind of have to be.
It really is. And, well, we might as well just get right into it. So, Emma, what we were trying to do here is just learn your story and kind of just figure out what your trials and tribulations were in life. So, my first question is going to be, what was it like for you growing up wherever you grew up? And what was the view of the military in both your family and the society you were growing up in?
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Tampa. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, but I moved down here before I was a year old for my dad's job. Yeah, so it's funny, I consider myself a native Floridian because it's kind of all I remember, but whenever it's anything crazy like a Florida man story, I get to claim that I'm from Kentucky because I was born there. But my family is huge. My mom is one of 9, my dad's one of 5. Yeah, and so I have tons of cousins and aunts and uncles. I mean, I think on my mom's side I have like 40 cousins, and that's not an exaggeration. But out of all of them, my grandpa was the only person who served in the military, and he was in the Army. He got drafted for World War II. And back then it was crazy because within like a year and a half, he made it to Master Sergeant. Yeah, he made it to Germany and had someone come up to him and ask permission to use one of the vehicles. And he was like, "Why are you asking me? You should ask your commander." And they were like, "Well, sir, you are in charge of us." So yeah, that's how he figured out he got promoted. But other than that, I think I have like one extended cousin somewhere on the line that was in the reserves or the National Guard or something, but nobody else has been in the military. And I'm one of 3 girls, and I'm the youngest. So, growing up, that mindset was just non-existent, right? Because we just never had that masculine energy in my family. And honestly, I had never considered going into the military until my senior year of high school. And I was probably the last person you would have ever expected to enlist. But I just knew that I wasn't ready for college. I knew that if I were to have gone even on scholarship, I probably would have messed it up. And that's a lot of money to go into debt to mess up, you know what I mean? So I started exploring my options, and at the time I wanted to go like FBI, CIA, one of the government agencies. And I thought, I might as well take my ASVAB, see how I do, and if I do okay, I'll see what my options are. And when I walked into the recruiter, my recruiter was like, "Are you in the right place?" And I was like, "I think so." But yeah, I ended up doing so well on my ASVAB that I kind of got to handpick my job. I didn't get a 99. I told my recruiter if I didn't get a 99, I didn't want to know what it was. Just a pride thing, but I think I was close up there. I think I saw like a 96. Yeah.
Just for the audience, the ASVAB is the entry level test to get into the military, and you take it to kind of evaluate what your capabilities could be in the military if you were looking for an MOS or a military occupational specialty. So her getting a 96 on the ASVAB is almost unheard of.
I messed up on the electrical part. That's like, I was staring at that part for like so long, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm never going to be an electrician, and I was fine with it. Yeah. But so I did really well on the ASVAB, thankfully, and I got into the intel section of the Army. So I was a PowerPoint ranger during my time, and I've always been just a very analytical person, a very, education-based person. I love learning new things. So what I was doing was actually, quite interesting once I got there. But that's, kind of how I got into it. And I remember being so scared to tell my parents. My poor dad, his jaw just hit the floor. He was like, "Are you kidding me? My baby is going into the Army." I didn't even tell them that I even took the ASVAB. Like, I just was kind of like, "Hey, I'm staying in a hotel next week and, doing my in-processing and everything." And they were like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I joined the Army." And God, my dad, he was not excited about it, but, he kind of had to learn to live with it.
Wow. And what's crazy is that there's so many people that, at least from what I've seen, that can relate to that type of story where they just kind of didn't tell anybody about it. And then it's like, you better just deal with the consequences of my actions.
Yeah, it's too late now.
It's too late. And so I would love to know, what was it like? So after you did go to training, what was it like for your family knowing that their little girl is now gone and they're having to deal with like the reality?
It was a lot, actually. So, having 3 daughters, I think, is a lot of stress on a family to begin with, especially when the 3 of us were all so different. So that was kind of a weird time in my family dynamic. And looking back, I do kind of think it, threw a little fuel into the fire, because it was a lot. And then plus with everything that went on with me while I was in the military, I think was kind of difficult for my family as well, because I was on the other side of the country and I was 18 years old, first time away from home. And so it was stressful, but I think the letter aspect of basic training was really nice for my mom, because I got like 3 letters from her a day, I feel like, and I kept getting photos, and it was so nice, honestly, keeping in touch that way. But it was a difficult dynamic for sure. And I remember after I signed up and I had a few months before our basic started, I was going and visiting some of my extended family in Kentucky and California, and all of them lectured me, right? None of them supported me. They were all like, "You're silly for doing this. You're not ready. You're a young female. You have so much potential. Why would you put yourself in danger?" And none of them had that open mindset that I had about it. I was like, this is a great opportunity. Are you kidding me? I'm going to learn discipline. I'm going to get my college paid for. I have the potential to travel. I'm going to be able to meet all these people. And they just, didn't see it that way. But, looking back, I understand why. It's a very big commitment for a young girl to, join the military. So I get where they were coming from.
Just for perspective, about what time frame did you decide to join the Army?
I enlisted. I think I don't think I enlisted until right after I graduated. And so that was I think I enlisted in June, and then I shipped out in September or August. I think, yeah, August, September. So I had 2 or 3 months of.
What year?
Oh Lord, 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
9 years.
Yeah.
So when you were going through the whole, because this is a whole culture shock for you. This is, you've had brothers and, family members that were kind of your protectors your whole life growing up. And now you're kind of getting put in this scenario where you're getting taught how to be a protector.
Yeah.
And, you have, it's a whole mental kind of conditioning. And I wanted to ask, what was it like for you going through this training and trying to recondition your brain to think differently?
I think that I've always kind of been a caregiver. Out of all of my friends and stuff, I've always kind of been the mom of the group. So I've always looked out for people. I've always, tried to make sure everyone was okay. And granted, that's a huge difference coming from a military standpoint. But I mean, it was a lot. And honestly, I did have that protector type mentality, but I think I also accepted being protected, right? Because the the people who were in my unit and everything, they were great. My basic training, like everybody was awesome. And it was kind of like I became like the little sister of everybody in a weird way. So, the protector mentality, I don't know how much of an impact that had with me, but I think the community mentality, I think is one of the biggest things that shaped me from the military.
I would say learning that power by numbers is really one of the key components to the military. The goal is to not be the Medal of Honor recipient that just did the crazy survival, high risk, high reward. It's more of a communal type of approach, and you are able to overcome adversity with the people next to you. And that's why you die for your brother or sister, and that's what makes it such a very effective way of kind of taking on tasks. So I would like to progress with what would you say is when you finally got out of basic and you kind of became a soldier, going to your first station was for school, correct?
Yes.
What was that type of, because Intel is a very, integrated, detailed type of field in the military. What was that schooling kind of like?
Kind of vague.
I loved it. So first off, going from basic to having like absolutely no freedom at all to going to AIT was just amazing. It was a lot. I was like, when I was in basic, I was like, oh my God, what the hell did I get myself into? Am I going to have to go through this shit every single day for 4 years? God. But once I got into AIT, it was kind of a breath of fresh air. But, Intel schooling.
If I may, what was AIT?
AIT is Advanced Individual Training. So that is the training that you go to in the Army specifically. I'm not sure about the other branches, but it's what you go to right after basic. So, basic training kind of teaches everybody how to be a soldier, right? Because your core value is like being a soldier. So if you get deployed, you have to know what you're doing, right? Even though if I would have ever been deployed, I would have been in a bunker somewhere. If shit hit the fan, I would have to be able to respond. So basic just kind of prepares you for high stress environments and, the basics of what you need to survive in that type of environment as well. And then once you go to AIT after your, when I went, it was 10 weeks. I think now it's 8. But after basic training, you go to your job training, and that, teaches you the specialty for whatever you're going to do in the military. So mine was an Intel analyst school. And I was on a base called Fort Huachuca down in Arizona. We used to call it Fort We Gotcha. And it was south of Tucson. It was like right above the Mexican border. And so like in the mornings, we were on such a high elevation that it would snow for PT. And then by the afternoon, we'd have to be like rolling our uniforms up. So I remember coming from Florida when I landed in Arizona, feeling like SpongeBob when he didn't have water, like, I need it. Because, like, I'm so used to drinking my air, right? It's so humid down here. And in Arizona, it's so dry. I had like an instant nosebleed. I was dehydrated. I was like coughing all day. And I had never seen that many shades of brown in my life, right? Like, I'm so used to like green and lush, and it was just so brown. But I don't know. Intel, it was easy for me, Again, I'm a very analytical person, and in the military, they kind of make things Barney style. Just so, people of different backgrounds can kind of understand the basics before you dive into things that were more difficult. So that to me, like I actually, I should have recycled quite a few times because I had gotten hurt. So I was going through like physical therapy and stuff. But because I understood what I was doing so well, I never did. The only reason I never graduated from AIT is because I couldn't take a PT test and I couldn't do the final FTX to like, or which is a field training exercise, to like get that check mark to move on because of my physical limitations.
So how did it's very common for people to go through kind of issues in training that will cause them to get separated very early. What was the kind of treatment that you were given right to kind of address those issues?
Yeah, so I got hurt actually in basic training. it kind of boiled down to I'm only 5'1", and the equipment is built for your average size male. So no matter how high I had my rucksack, tightened or sitting up on my back, it was still all on my lower back. And so in the Army, we do like 6-7 weeks of carrying about 80 pounds of equipment everywhere we go. And that's walking on trans, like literally you bring it everywhere. And so over time, it just kind of messed up my back and lower hips. But in basic training, they encourage you not to go to sick call, like not to go see the doctor, because they tell you, you want to get in, you want to get out. Anytime you go to sick call, you're putting yourself at jeopardy of being stuck in this environment. So I waited it out, and I was going to try to wait until after AIT as well, but I remember I was marching to like one of those like Saturday day classes that, teach you about like sexual harassment or whatever it is for that day, and I was crying in formation because it was hurting so bad to walk. So after that, I finally went to sick call and got evaluated, and I had quite an extensive treatment, actually. So I hurt my lower back and both my hips, and so for the longest time I was on crutches. And actually, because it was both my hips, I had to like crutch a really awkward way, and I looked so silly. And I remember because the base that I was at was actually an officer training base as well for the Air Force and the Army, actually. But we were walking past a group of butter bars, and they like stopped us, and I was on
Second
crutch.
or first lieutenant, just for
I'm sorry,
audience
but butter bars are first lieutenants, so
Gotcha.
they are they're second lieutenants.
They're
Okay,
second
yeah.
lieutenants.
The black one's the first lieutenant. No,
No, you have a second lieutenant, then a first lieutenant is the
Okay.
silver one. But I'm also coming from a Marine Corps perspective, so I'm very,
yeah.
it may be
I think
different.
the rank and file is pretty similar.
Yeah, that's what I thought. As
I
well.
think it's been a while, but they're the baby officers.
Yes.
Yeah, and so
The boots.
Yeah, so they have this sense of entitlement, you know what I mean? And I was crutching past them, and my battle buddy stopped and saluted, and I stopped, but like I didn't salute. I'm on crutches, and one of them was like, "Private, aren't you gonna salute for your officers?" My smart ass picked my crutch up and saluted with my crutch. I'm like, what the hell do you want me to do right now? His friend started laughing so hard he was beat red after that. But I mean, look, don't ask me to salute on crutches. But yeah, so I was going through physical therapy 5 days a week. I was doing 3 days in clinic, 2 days in the pool. And I just wasn't making quick enough progress to meet the physical standards of the military, and because I was still in training and I wasn't like, they give you a little bit more wiggle room once you're like in the real Army, once you've passed training and stuff. But because I was in training, they just kind of, had the conversation with me. Hey, look, like you've recycled a few times, like you can't do your FTX or whatever, like you're not making enough progress. I think it's time that we explore, some exit plans.
So what type of plans were they speaking of at that time? Like, what were your options?
So they gave me two options. I could med board and wait about a year or so in AIT in that environment, or I could get out and do the med board when I got back. So I chose to get out, and I did the med board once I got home, which I think honestly was a great decision. The only thing I regret is if I would have stayed in, I would have kept collecting that check, just sitting around doing nothing. But, in the long run, I think it was a better decision for me to go home first.
So after you went home, is this when you officially separated from the military?
Yes.
And what did you take with you after you had gone out into the civilian environment now? Because now you kind of had to go through this whole experience, and it's something that kind of sticks with you. You can't just forget that you just went through all this. So how did that apply to now you're trying to get into the civilian world? And
Well, so I think one of the most difficult parts about me being in the military as a young female was just the overall masculine atmosphere that I was in. I'm a sexual assault survivor, and being in that environment just kind of exacerbated everything. Plus, getting hurt, I felt a lot, weaker and more vulnerable than I normally am or normally would have felt. And because of that, I was put on all of these different medications from my Army doctor, and I actually ended up having a serotonin overdose. Yeah, so that kind of segments into my, story on why I'm in the industry that I'm in today. But that environment just really kind of did a lot to me mentally. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that because, they want to be positive about the military. And again, it was one of the best things that I've ever done for myself. I mean, I'm way more disciplined. I'm way more detail oriented. I perform better in a high stress environment than I do in a chill environment. So there was a lot of positive things that came out of me being in the military, but I think it was, really just, it was a lot. So I knew that I wasn't in a mindset coming out of the military to kind of like take on real life. So I actually, my poor dad, he hates me. After I got out of the military, I became a nanny in France. So I moved to Europe for a year, picked up and moved away again, but this time not across the country, across the ocean to a different country.
What part of France?
I was in the south of France, in a small town called Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. It was actually the town that Vincent van Gogh chopped his ear off in the insane asylum at.
Wow.
Yeah, fun fact. That was one of the first things I did. They do like free museum Sundays, and my family took me to the museum, and it was really cool. Like standing in his bedroom, looking out the window, that like you've seen paintings of the gardens and stuff. It was cool, but yeah. So I went to France and I nannied for the most amazing family, and the best thing about the French is they really value their time off. And so I got quite a lot of time off. I mean, it was incredible, and I got to travel around everywhere. For super, super cheap. Like my best friend was studying in Amsterdam at the time. So it would cost me $40 for a round trip flight to get to Amsterdam. And then she was a dual citizen. So like the government paid for everything. So I would go to Amsterdam for the weekend and just have some fun. Yeah. But I tell people, I think the military was the best thing I ever did to like solidify myself, and then the trip to France, like the travel experience, was the best thing I ever did to discover myself, if that makes sense.
Well, I do you feel like you built up the bravery to do it, to go off by yourself to France after the military?
I definitely think the military gave me a lot of tools in my toolbox that I wouldn't have had before, or if I didn't enlist. I mean, I've always been kind of a go-getter. My dad jokes, I had an ex-boyfriend of mine ask him once, like, how did you deal with her? And his response was, I just got the hell out of her way. So I've always just kind of had that, once I put my mind to it, I'm going to do it type mindset. But I think that the military gave me the confidence and trusting my own ability and my own strengths to be successful in an environment that I wasn't used to, because going over there, I took French in high school, but it's not like I actually spoke it, So just being in environments that you're not used to, or cultures that you've never experienced and stuff. I think my Army training, one, gave me the strength, but two, because I don't want to say deal with, because that sounds like a negative connotation, but because I was immersed in such adversity in the military, and you're really just taught to talk to everybody and respect everybody, and not judge a book by the cover. I think that really gave me a one-up when I was traveling, because I was able to kind of immerse myself more into the experience than what your average citizen would do.
Solid foundation.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to put it. That is a great way to put it, because it did build that foundation for me, and then I guess my travel time kind of decorated the walls, if you want to put it that way.
That's beautifully artistic. I love that. So I kind of want to circle back to something that you said before. Well, for me, being in the Marine Corps is the smallest branch of the military, and it is also the most highly male-dominated branch out of every branch. So it was very different for me seeing women in the military. It's kind of the basic thought that they're supposed to be separate, and seeing female Marines, it was a lot of men trying to be courteous and open the doors and have manners and do all these things for women because it's been instilled in them for such a deep thing. But it also is a crutch because then they tell them what to do. They feel that they have authority over them. They also feel that if you don't listen to them, they're a man. So even if you're the same rank, they have authority over you. It was very hard for me to see what women had to go through, the adversity, not being seen as an equal, not feeling that they were accepted in that group. And it took me getting out of the Marine Corps, and it brought to perspective just what it took for a female to choose the Marine Corps out of any branch. Out of all the branches, they chose the Marine Corps. And let alone some of them they didn't even get in at first. They had to try again and again. And these women were so mentally resilient. And while we were in, we didn't even appreciate them for what they were. They were literally the leaders of our society that I was witnessing face to face.
Well, what's interesting is that you say that. When I was in basic training, we, obviously, my company had males and females, but they didn't separate us. But I mean, they did every now and then, separate us for certain things. And one time, two of our female drill sergeants called us out to the lawn, just the females, and they had a conversation with us. And they basically told us, as a female in the military, you have two options. You can be a bitch or you can be a slut, right? And that's what you've got. And they said, we hope to God every single girl sitting in front of us are considered bitches, right? And that's so, it sounds so derogatory and so demeaning, but when you really think about it, it's the truth. It's either the men in the military are going to call you a bitch because you have that authoritative, presence, or you're more dominant, or you just, you're not submissive in certain things, which, you should be. That's how you should be in the military. Or men look at you more so as like a piece of meat. And that's why, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're a slut or you're sleeping around. I don't believe in slut shaming at all. But it was kind of like you can be someone that they hated or someone that everybody loved. And it was true. Like, again, as a young female in the military, like, I couldn't tell you how many times my, commanders or, people of authority in my unit or whatever would say certain things to me. Or, even if it's just like brushing something aside or making some type of accommodation or whatever, like it's really something that affects you as someone who's trying to be an individual, because we get told as a female, like, no, like, you are equal. You don't need this man holding your door. You don't need help carrying your equipment up the hill or anything like that. Like, do it on your own. And then you still have people who are in power, like, trying to make accommodations, or they're judging you or whatever. And then you see, guys doing the stupidest shit and they can get away with it, And so it was a lot. Yeah, it was a very interesting dynamic to be a part of, for sure.
And especially for a lot of, hopefully, female listeners, the act of sexual assault is such a very broad thing, and it happens so commonly in that circle. It's something that we have classes on over and over. It's beaten, to a pulp. There's really no, from a military standpoint, they are taking every avenue to get education out there, but it's not education. It's coping mechanisms. You have a lot of men that don't know how to direct their emotions. They're young, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Some of them are older, but they were raised in a very non-enabling environment or non-conducive environment. And so you have people that have very childish tendencies. But the effect of that is that it comes at a cost to other people's mental states and their mental health. And for women that deal with sexual assault, it's not just the act of sexual assault. One, it's the way that it gets handled by your peer group. Two, by your command. Three, by the entire military. You have people in your company or your platoon or your group that will shame you or become distant from you if you expose someone of authority. It's instilled in people that go against the grain need to get cut off. And if a high-ranking officer or enlisted member does something inappropriate with a low-ranking individual, it is propagated to where that low-ranking individual is now expendable because they don't want to take away from their hierarchy. And this person has too much value to the direction of a mission, and this low-ranking individual is now expendable, and they just cut them off. The problem is that person that gets cut off now has to live their life with this lifelong trauma. And this energy doesn't go away. This person now has to cope. This person now has to find therapy. This person now has to find a job. This person now has to deal with the trust issues that everywhere they go, they can't trust if somebody that's in authority is going to be someone that's good for them or somebody that's going to put them in a high-risk situation. So in my perspective, a woman that gets sexually assaulted and put off to the side is actually more beneficial to society because they're more a resilient individual. That high-ranking individual that did this trauma to this person, in my mind, is less beneficial to society because they are given benefactors that other people don't have to overcome. And those people that overcome it now are resilient, mentally strong individuals, and now that high-ranking official or officer or entitled member may commit suicide 2 years after they get out of the military because they don't have anything else outside of the military. That's a long spiel. That's just kind of how I feel, and I made it a point to make sure I had a woman as my second guest because shining a light on it, it's a boys' club, but there are women that are key contributors to that club, and it is not a boys' club anymore. Now it's a fully inclusive club. So I'm sorry. I wanted to say if you had anything to say to a woman that may have dealt with something like that, that may be quiet, that doesn't feel that speaking about it or that they feel shame.
I mean, anytime that I ever have anybody come to me with stories, I always encourage them to speak up. And by speaking up, I don't necessarily mean you have to take legal action and start, everything crazy, because that within itself is traumatizing and you have to relive it, and it is a lot. And I do believe that people should be held accountable for their actions, but sometimes you don't know what can of beans you're opening when you do that. So but you can speak up to a counselor, or there's a lot of support groups and everything like that, and finding your community and finding your tribe, I think, is very important as a sexual assault or sexual harassment survivor, because you start to blame yourself that, maybe I was acting this way and I deserve that type of behavior, or blah, 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 whatever you could come up with. And that's just not true, right? You should be able to act however you want to act and feel safe in your environment, especially in an environment that you're legally bound to, right? I think that's one thing you didn't mention. It's like, a lot of women don't speak up because what are they like? Okay, so they speak up, they talk about someone within their unit, and it doesn't even have to be someone way higher up, but then what? Now they're stuck in that same thing in that same place for 2 years, 3 years, and they have to be known as the bitch who said something, and whatever. And so it can really just have an unfortunate domino effect. But there are other ways that you can talk about things, and you can start getting those thoughts out of your head and thinking more, I don't want to say realistically, but more level-headed, because that type of trauma can do a lot to someone's brain, male or female, and talking about it, and learning different techniques and coping mechanisms and ways to rewire your thinking and stuff can be really beneficial. So I think one of the most important things is go find someone to talk to, because that's going to do, a world of help.
And I absolutely want to clarify that sexual assault and harassment can happen to a man or a woman. It's not just a woman-oriented action. Thank you so much for saying that. So I want to kind of progress into your post-military. I would love to hear, once you were in France, you really got into like the culture. You got into culture, you got into finding yourself, you got into taking care of others, but also being free. What brought you back to America? If you came back to America, I don't want to,
I did come back. I think, I got very lucky with the family that I nannied for. And I didn't want to take a risk of doing it for another year and not having the same experience. Like, I kind of felt like, okay, I have this really great experience. I got to travel. Now let me, take the past 2 years, from being in the military and being the au pair, and really apply it. And I think I was ready to be an adult. Or, I thought I was ready to be an adult. I'm still not there yet.
Start flapping in the nest.
Yeah, like I needed to start working out my wings and seeing, what I was capable of. So I came home and I started waitressing just to make some fast cash. And I did. And actually what was great about that, because of my military training, like I mentioned earlier, I do a lot better in stressful environments. And so I was able to, make it to like front of house manager in a couple of months. And it was, that was a lot of fun. But then I started going to school. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I was creative. I wanted to do stuff with other people and, storytelling and stuff like that. But I wasn't quite sure. And I had also been out of school for a few years. So rather than going into university, I started community college. And it was great. I did like all of my classes online except like 2 of them. It was fire. It was like the best. I recommend this to everybody because your core classes are the same pretty much anywhere you go. And if you could do it for a third of the price and do it online, like why wouldn't you? So that's what I did. And I think I was in like my 3rd semester, or I was finishing my 3rd semester. And I wasn't going to take any summer classes. And so I was like, I should get an internship. I should do something productive with my time. And so I started looking on Indeed. And lo and behold, an internship in marketing for a medical cannabis physician's practice was available. And God, I didn't even realize that weed had been, medically legalized out here yet. And I love smoking weed. I think it's one of the most medicinal things ever for my anxiety and PTSD and chronic pain. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to apply. I'm probably not going to get it. I'm a community college girl, like going up against like USF and all that stuff. But I'm going to give it a shot. And I was actually the only applicant who wrote a cover letter. Yeah. So cover letters are very important, you guys.
Very important. Essential.
What time frame was this?
2015, 2016, maybe. I think I've been in.
Okay.
Nice.
Or, I think 2016.
Because you got out of the military in 2013.
I got out of the military in 2014.
2014. You joined 2013, got out 2014.
So it had to have been
France.
2016.
Okay.
Or we're in 22 now. Maybe even 2017. Because, it was 2017 because cannabis got legalized in Florida in 2016. And then I started, I think, March of 2017.
Tracking.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm like having to go through my brain, like, where?
Well, it's good. Now we know what the chronological order of things are.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So yeah, I applied for this internship. I got a phone call like the next day. They invited me for an interview, and I remember walking into this interview so scared. I was late. This was like my first professional opportunity. Like I had no idea what to expect. And I walked into this room, and I was met by 2 young women. And I remember walking into that room and just being like, this is going to change the rest of my life. Like, this is where I need to be at the right time. And it was. So, in my interview, I kind of gave my personal story with cannabis and how, my family uses it as well. And that's kind of what I included in my cover letter, too, and more short. But I ended up getting the internship, and, the rest is history.
So, just to clarify, what did you go to school to study?
So I was only in for my AA, it was just
Wow,
general AA. Yeah. Eventually I wanted to go in for like marketing or communications or something like that. But at the time I was just doing my prereqs. Yeah.
Wow. So anybody out there that only has prereqs, still try, because you never know what
don't
might
give up.
happen.
Yeah. I mean, look, always try. The worst you're going to get is no response or a no. And you're not going to get that if you didn't try to begin with. And for, all you might get a yes like I did. Like, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I'm a community college girl. What do you mean you're going to pick me? But, it just put me in that opportunity to kind of, present who I was and what I'm capable of and what I could bring to the table. And they liked it, So it was great. And it was incredible being a part of the very beginning of medical cannabis in here in Florida. And to see the evolution over the past 5 years has just been wild to me. But that was awesome. I mean, starting off in the forefront as a young female, I mean, I've kind of grown up professionally in this industry, and it's been a very unique experience.
So you're essentially one of the trailblazers in the marijuana. We can get into a whole spiel on the wording, but cannabis in Florida, I mean, it's really been blowing up the past couple of years. But to be at the beginning stages of something that, essentially could be one of the largest revenues of the state, it's really incredible. So for you, being a marijuana cannabis user, how did that kind of relate to the work that you were doing? Did it make you more passionate about the type of work that you were doing, or did you get exposed to a whole new world that you never even knew existed?
I would say both. Because prior to getting into the legal cannabis market, I was involved in the black market. And, like I mentioned earlier, I had ended up in the ER with a serotonin overdose while I was in the Army. And in that moment, I kind of realized, okay, like, this isn't for me. Like, the pharmaceuticals, I think they're very beneficial for a lot of people, but I just didn't think it was, for me. And so, I had actually started smoking weed in high school, but it was still kind of like taboo for me to be doing that. And I remember, if I would smoke every day, I would like tell myself, oh my God, you're going to be a crackhead. Like, how could you do this? Like, you're never going to amount to anything when you grow up. And, but then when I would like be like, oh my God, I smoked a bowl after school, I'd be like, okay, I got to cut back. And I would realize my anxiety and my panic would come back full force when I wasn't smoking. So kind of at a young age, I realized the potential medical benefits of cannabis, but it just didn't really click in my head, like specifically. I thought it just calmed me down. And so when I got into the legal industry, like, I was using it, and obviously, like, I was passionate about it. I thought it was great or whatever, but it wasn't until one of the women who was like on the market, it was on the marketing team that I was a part of. It was just me and the two women who interviewed me. And one of them, she came from Colorado. And she told me, she's like, if I could give you any piece of advice, it would be to learn the science behind this plant. Because this was back in the beginning. Nobody in Florida knew anything about terpenes or minor cannabinoids, flavonoids, like none of that. And so she's like, just learn the science, like educate yourself, research. When you don't have anything to do while you're here, read a book or something, But cannabis is so much more than just THC. And she goes, Florida will realize that sooner than later, and you'll be, one of the people who kind of helped with that movement. And so that's what I did. I started diving into educating myself, and I was so blessed that I worked with a physicians group, because I could read these articles and then go ask one of my doctors, like, what the hell does this mean? So then, we ended up growing. We started off as, one of the main physicians groups that kind of hit the ground running in Florida. Excuse me. But we didn't really grow. Like, by the time I left, we were the largest physicians group in the state. We had like 85,000 active patients. We had like a fifth of the registry. That's going to be a little off now, probably. But yeah, I left about a year ago. But one of the best things about it is I got to deal hands-on on, like hands-on with our patients, right? And so I would see patients coming back on their 7-month follow-up and how much it changed them. And I would have consultations with patients and everything. So, I mean, I think I went into cannabis knowing what the potential of it was, but not until I got into it did I really realize all of the benefits that this little plant can bring to people.
I had a question. So about that time frame, you got your internship, 2016. The Trump administration had took office. Who was at the forefront, or who was leading from the front as far as Florida goes regarding the legalization and perhaps decriminalization of cannabis?
I mean, there was quite a lot of people involved in the community and lobbying and everything like that back in the day. Specifically, I can't remember exactly what organizations were involved in the grassroots, and I don't want to say the wrong one and give the wrong people the credit, or, you know, miss out on giving the right people the credit. But I mean, there's a lot of lobbying and a lot of behind the scenes deals that were being made. And I don't know if you guys are up to date with all of the legal drama that's going on in Florida cannabis industry with some of the big players, but there was just a lot of really shady stuff going on in the beginning of the legalization here in Florida. And I mean, there still kind of is. It's politics, unfortunately, but yeah, to tell you an exact, unfortunately, I'm not really sure.
I would like to ask, since you got a lot of your exposure, not necessarily from the physicians. Yes, you had them as a source, but it was from the patients. Mm-hmm. What did you see with the veteran community in the patient response, the treatment, and then how you feel that it needs to get more, kind of instilled in our treatment process?
Yeah, so, I mean, in the beginning, as a VA patient, personally, I was terrified to mention that I had a medical cannabis card. I mean, I was even afraid to get one because I was like, oh my God, like I'm going to get this card. It's going to be public record. It's going to be in some system somewhere, and the VA is going to find out about it, and they're going to, cut off all my benefits and shame me and, never want anything to do with me again. And I think that was a lot of veterans in the beginning. A lot of veterans kind of have the same mindset because, I don't think a lot of vets are happy with the quality of care that they get at the VA, but also it's something that they rely on in case of emergencies or if something, goes wrong. And so we don't want to mess that up. And a lot of the doctors, I mean, once I kind of became more aware of actual legalities and, over time it started kind of getting normalized through the VA. And so, you started hearing stories here and there in different Facebook groups, which if you are a vet and you're curious about medical cannabis or any kind of holistic health, Facebook is a great platform to kind of ask some questions in a safe space because there's a lot of veteran-focused groups on Facebook. And
Any in particular that come to the top of your head?
Buds for Vets is a really popular one. There's a ton. I'm not really on Facebook too much anymore. I'm trying to cut back on my social media use for mental health reasons. But yeah, Buds for Vets is a really good one. And they do a lot of community work as well. Weed for Warriors, they have a group, I'm pretty sure. I mean, there's quite a lot of organizations, but once we kind of all had the platform and the safe space to talk about this stuff, because I mean, I think even if you're friends with other vets, that might be something you're nervous about talking to about because of the stigma and everything behind it. But having that veteran-focused group really kind of gave us the platform to have those conversations and get more comfortable with cannabis use. And then, I think because of how rapidly things have legalized throughout the U.S. since Florida became medical, there's just been a lot more conversations happening in terms of veterans and cannabis usage and the VA and stuff. And so there's definitely been a great evolution. And there should be, because cannabis is so beneficial. We actually have a system in our body that is designed specifically for cannabinoids. It's called the endocannabinoid system. If you haven't heard about it, I highly recommend you do some research, because its core mission kind of is to maintain homeostasis, which is your happy, healthy medium. It's your Goldilocks zone. So if you have anything out of whack, whether it be inflammation or pain or chemicals or hormones or whatever, like cannabis, there's a cure, not a cure, but cannabis can help it. And I think once people finally started having those conversations that they were too afraid to have, you started to see a lot more veterans utilizing cannabis, which personally I think is incredible, because all of those veterans who are utilizing it are getting off of prescription medications and they're having a good quality of life again. They're able to walk their dog, or they're able to stay calm enough to have a conversation with their wife or their kids, and there's just quite a lot of things that it can help with. And I mean, you were at Cannadelic and you saw the panel. I mean, I remember some of those people, I've known them since cannabis became legalized, and to see how much they've grown. I mean, and they're 20 years, some of them are like 20, 30 years older than me, you know what I mean? I'm not that old, but they've just completely transformed as an individual. And it's amazing, to hear some of those stories. It was just, I mean, even someone who is a storyteller, to hear someone else's, I mean, it was incredible. It was so motivating. I left that panel at Cannadelic just like ready to go.
So what she's referring to is the Cannabis Psychedelic Expo that was held in Miami this past month in February. And that's where she and I crossed paths, and I was able to bring her on as a guest. I want to kind of circle back. My experience with the VA is I'm 100% service disabled, so you get prescribed an incredible amount of narcotics and also a wide variety of prescriptions. So what happens is you get kind of conditioned to take these pills, and you get kind of addicted to it, because your body gets used to having that supplement constantly. So what happens is if your doctor finds out that that you fail your piss test, your drug test, they can stop giving you your narcotics, because it's in a federally illegal substance. So the stigma that you're going to lose your prescriptions because you're now addicted to them, because you need them to just function as a normal person, that getting taken away by just smoking or having it in your system, it puts a lot of fear into people, and they don't even want to kind of trudge that path, because the last thing they want is to feel that they don't have control over their environment or themselves. I would ask you, what are some kind of key words that veterans should look into related to cannabis, such as like flavonoids, terpenes, different?
I think, one of the best things that you could do is just Google like cannabis is medicine or cannabis 101. There's quite a lot of blogs that are written, that are out there. Leafly is a great source. I write a lot of blogs for a company called DocMJ. They're the physicians group that I used to work with. There's quite a lot of education out there. And so go Barney style, go what we're used to, just cannabis 101, marijuana 101. Why is marijuana medicine, right? And you're going to get a very basic introduction, and then after you get that introduction, certain things are going to start picking your brain, and you're going to want to learn more about it, right? The most incredible thing about cannabis is it's so individualized, right? Everybody reacts to this stuff differently. Everybody needs, different things, and you can really do it at your own pace. So from a physician's standpoint, we used to tell our patients, start low and go slow, right? Because you can add more into your regimen, and take a little longer, but once you've added too much, it's kind of hard to like negate that high or those feelings that you might get. And another really important thing is that psychoactivity does not necessarily mean that the medicine is being effective, right? I think a lot of them have hesitations about getting high. Like they don't want to get high. They don't want to lose that sense of control. And, while getting high off of cannabis is nothing like getting high off an opioid or anything like that. It's a lot milder. It's still scary, especially when a lot of these people have grown up with such a stigma. And so there's quite a lot of options out there, like just CBD or a ratio based, like a 1-to-1 or a 4-to-1 or something like that that you could start with. Or even just take a microdose. Like, you don't have to keep hitting your pin until you feel high, right? Take 1 or 2 hits, see if you get relief, and go from there. And I think really just any kind of education about this is important, because it starts making you think about other things about it or question certain things. And, once you do find something that works for you, it's going to change your life, and you're going to feel more empowered to try something else and dabble your feet. And so, like whenever I would have a patient come in for their first time and they'd come and sit with me and they'd be nervous about going to a dispensary, I would encourage them, first off, try every dispensary, because every dispensary has different quality of products, different options, different strains or whatever. So you would be doing yourself an injustice to only stick with one. But also try products that you might not necessarily have tried, right? Like, I, in the beginning, was like, I just want to smoke and vape. Like, I don't need a tincture, I don't need capsules, anything like that. And then because of the work that I did at Doc and J, a lot of the dispensaries would come to me about their new products versus all of our doctors, because we had like 50 doctors under our belt. Yeah, we had a lot. And so rather than trying to contact all those 50 doctors and teach them about their product, they would teach me or have me try it, and then I could kind of be that liaison for our physicians. So I was given a transdermal patch to try once. I would have never have spent $15 on a transdermal patch, right? I'm over here like, I smoke like Snoop Dogg. I got the highest freaking tolerance out of anybody I know. Like, what the hell is a little transdermal microdose patch going to do for me? You know what I mean? And I got it for free, and I tried it out just to try it out, because I'm like, okay, I need to practice what I preach. It was one of the best things I've ever tried. It was so great. I didn't get high off of it, but like the pain relief that I received and the anxiety relief that I received from it was just amazing. And the inhaler, one of the dispensaries has a cannabis inhaler, and it's a microdose, and it's not something that, you would typically expect to, use. But when I used it, like, I would keep it by my bedside table, because I would hit it first thing in the morning, and it was like a shot of espresso. Like, it really just got me motivated. It took away all of my pain, all of my grogginess, everything like that, and I was ready to go. So there are so many things that you can try depending on what your comfort zone is. I mean, you can get a capsule, you can get a tincture, So I recommend trying whatever sparks your curiosity, and just, again, going with the basics. Like, you don't have to come into this being an expert in marijuana. Like, nobody is. I wasn't. None of our doctors were. So it's just starting with the beginning and going from there.
I just want to clarify that the ratio that Emma was speaking of is the CBD to THC ratio. So if you start doing research and figure out what these acronyms mean, it's the cannabinol, and the tetrahydrocannabinol. So if you do research, you'll find out more about that. But I would love to get your opinion on alternative therapies for veterans. There's so much that isn't provided for veterans, and they have to kind of go seek it out. And there's a new revolution happening.
Yes, there is.
Happening right now, and I would love to get your take on what do you see as the future for this alternative therapy kind of industry, but also what kind of issues were lacking before that needed to be addressed with this therapy?
So I'm going to pull the cat out of the bag and say that this new wave is the psychedelic wave, which is so exciting to me, because psychedelics and, holistic medicine has been around for thousands of years, tens and thousands of years. I mean, pharmaceuticals didn't become like normalized besides I think in the 1800s, right? And it was right around the Industrial Revolution, I think, is when, it kind of became more of like a...
I think Rockefeller has something to do with that.
Yeah, it was like way back in the day, and I could go on, I could get on my soapbox and start talking about the pharmaceutical industry, but I don't want to give them that credit. Yeah, the holistic health. I mean, Eastern medicine and indigenous practices and stuff have been around for forever, and they've worked for forever. You know what I mean? It wasn't until the war on drugs where we kind of started to go, hey, look, no, let's not do this. Let's put all of our efforts into pharmaceuticals. And so I think, one, that speaks volumes about the actual potential of this plant medicine and everything like that, because if it didn't work, why did we use it for so long? And so I think that's one thing, for people to start thinking about is like, yeah, we might have grown up with this stigma, just like a lot of people grew up with the stigma of cannabis, but it wasn't stigmatized forever. It hasn't been stigmatized forever. So, why was it being used? I think is something that people should ask each other. But I think the psychedelic industry is going to just boom, especially for a mental health standpoint, because it's absolutely incredible. But even further than mental health, I mean, there's quite a lot of benefits for psychedelics. I mean, I'm seeing research about pain studies. I had a client of mine who was researching like DMT microdose patches for neuroregenesis for like patients with dementia and stuff. So I mean, there's quite a lot of research that's going on right now, and honestly, like psychedelics have been researched longer than cannabis has. I don't know if you knew that. They've been getting research for forever. I mean, that's how LSD was created. And so I think that alone speaks a lot of volumes, but to me, it's a shame that it's so difficult to find a credible source or a safe environment to go have those, therapy sessions with and those healing moments with people. But I mean, we're seeing them pop up more and more. So, I think that says a lot too.
I feel that we're starting to really see that physicians are now getting educated the same way that society is. So a lot of physicians have no idea the intricacies and all the effects of cannabis, nor do they know the intricacies and the effects of psychedelics. So when these doctors are now getting told by people that may not even have a PhD, they may not even be certified doctors, but they've done research in this field to the point where they understand the molecular compounds and structures and how it affects the body, that they are now the source of information for these physicians. So for us as society, we've come to expect that doctors know everything. And now we're starting to see that no, actually individuals can tell us more than a doctor can about actual practical treatments for my ailments and issues and traumas. What did you learn about the cannabis and psychedelic kind of realm? What has it taught you? Kind of like how we're teaching doctors. What has it taught you that you could teach to doctors?
I think one of the favorite things I would hear from my doctors from my old job was doctors practice medicine, right? They're practicing, and that's why they call it a physician's practice. They're not experts. Nobody is 100% a know-it-all when it comes to medicine. And so that kind of put a lot of perspective into me or in my head. And I think that was another amazing thing about my job back then was getting able to have these conversations with physicians and teaching them about things because, a lot of people, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And when people don't bring up certain conversations or certain topics or whatever, you're never going to learn about them. And so having those conversations and telling these stories is, I think, very important for the medical community because, I mean, doctors and nurses and stuff, they experience medical anomalies all the time, like people healing from things that they would have never expected to. And, they can sometimes make sense of it, sometimes they can't, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen, you know what I mean? And they could have witnessed it and they might not know why it happened, but it still did happen. And so that's something that I think is very important in terms of like the cannabis and psychedelic space is feeling comfortable enough to share your story. because without stories being shared and this anecdotal evidence, then certain people might not feel the need to fund research, right? Like, from me sharing my story, I might be able to inspire someone whose son went through a similar experience and now they want to put all their money towards psychedelic research. You never know what sharing your story is going to be. And so I think just sparking that conversation and talking to these individuals can just start to shape their mind in a different way. I saw that in cannabis. I'm starting to see it now in psychedelics, and it's just, questioning them and getting those gears grinding again. A lot of these doctors are really freaking old. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't been in medical school in forever. They don't learn about, some of the stuff. I mean, my cousin right now, she's in pharmacy school, right? Up in Tennessee. And anytime I asked her, anytime you get anything about cannabis, like, I want to see it. And, I've probably only got a text like 3 or 4 times in the past few years about it. And it's all just like very basic stuff. And by now I'm like, okay, like, these textbooks should be a little more updated, whatever. But there's continuing education classes and, different conferences and stuff that these doctors can go to if that's what they're interested in. But again, I really think it's just talking about it and trying to normalize it to make people realize, like, hey, there's quite a lot of potential in this industry.
You spoke on having the serotonin overdose.
Yes.
What other ailments did you need to find a treatment for that you are currently addressing right now?
So PTSD and anxiety was a big one. I also deal with chronic pain issues from my injuries in the military. I have GI issues. I'm diagnosed with a heart condition as well. So I've got a couple of things that I use, cannabis, CBD, and psychedelics to help manage. But yeah, the main thing I think is the mental health part of it, though. Yeah.
Absolutely. Finding that, alternative. It's just more options. You don't necessarily have to stop taking your prescriptions. That's not what the purpose is. The purpose is for you to manage yourself in a healthy manner. And because we continuously use prescriptions, that's an unhealthy supplement. If you take protein every single day as your supplement for protein, it's going to have a negative effect on your body. So that's just kind of how our bodies are conditioned. It's only supposed to be short-term type of treatments. I would love to get Dan's take on kind of what physical ailments aren't getting addressed by the pharmaceutical community and how we should incorporate or at least keep an open mind to alternative therapies that are now being presented as alternative options.
I mean, perhaps, like, big thing for me, like, arthritis, maybe, inflammation, things of that sort. I don't really, I've never really took it too much for pain management. I've torn my ACL several times. I've lost count, man. But I did notice, when I did smoke, it helped. But just as well, I learned to deal with the pain without it. So it'd be interesting to see,
The future.
Look a little more into it.
Yeah. So, I mean, ideally, pain is kind of like the commonality of humans. We deal with pain. Everybody has their own form of pain, their own tier of pain. But, being able to cope is the biggest thing that we have an issue with, is we don't know how to cope, both emotionally, physically, spiritually. We just don't know how to cope. What are you doing in the space right now to kind of help facilitate not necessarily a change, but a new perspective in our community?
Storytelling and getting active, because when you tell your story, you're able to kind of put more of an emotional connection into the potential of this stuff. So my story with psychedelics, I tell people CBD is kind of like your warm fuzzy blanket, right? Like CBD and cannabis, it kind of comforts you, makes everything feel okay, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily like curbing the issue, right? But my psychedelic experience personally, I mean, I've taken psychedelics more than once, but like my big one that I like to tell people about is I took a pretty decent size dose of mushrooms. So psilocybin is the chemical inside of mushrooms that is the psychedelic chemical. And, you know, it was a fun time at first. You know, I had a great time. And then one of the waves, because when you do take psychedelics, sometimes depending on the ones that you take, the feelings of euphoria and the psychoactivity come and go, right? So your first wave of euphoria is usually like the strongest, and then it kind of like tapers off from there. Probably like my third wave, I was sitting outside and just everything kind of just like got a little darker and like a little more still and like not as bright and happy. And I was camping at the time, so I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna go inside of the camper. And as soon as I got inside of the camper and in this new environment, and it kind of felt like a shell that I went into, is like the easiest way to describe it. I started hysterically crying, and I was crying so hard that I could not physically hold myself up. Like I was on the floor, bawling my eyes out. I mean, you would have thought that my whole family just died right in front of my eyes. I was crying that hard, right? Which sounds traumatic, but I could physically feel all of the trauma that was locked in my brain just like washing out of my body. And it was wild. I mean, it was like I sat there. I mean, I had been in therapy for a decade, right? And I learned coping mechanisms, and I definitely grew from therapy. I think it's a great tool for people, but I never feel like I healed from my issue. I never feel like I was able to actually let go of that trauma. And those shrooms, man, they told me, you're letting go, bitch, whether you're ready or not. Like, we're washing that out of you. And that's literally what happened. And so I felt this just like wave of trauma just flood out of my body. It was just like a drain releasing. And all of a sudden, I wasn't crying anymore. And I was okay. And I wiped my face, and I probably looked like a crazy person after crying like that. But I walked out of the RV, and it was like walking into a new dimension, right? It was like, you know, I can see clearly now.
In with the good, out with the bad.
Like literally, I mean,
Yeah.
just it was surreal. It was like I timeline hopped, you know, like I didn't think I could have ever felt like that again. You know what I mean? Like I felt normal. And so I don't know, it's incredible.
Peaceful craft.
Peaceful. I will say that one thing that psychedelics do is the after effects of psychedelics are you don't truly know how much you're carrying with you on a daily basis. And what it does is once you unload it, you feel so much lighter. It's a very difficult thing to describe, is the constant weight of stress, the constant weight of shame, the constant weight of responsibility. It's something that we kind of integrate it into our daily lives. It's kind of inbred into us. And being able to actually take a breath without that weight, it's almost like an epiphany. Like you have this new spiritual awakening that you're now a new person that doesn't have to feel all this burden all the time.
Did you shed a layer?
Yeah, you're shedding your layers. We put up walls, you know, instinctually. Like we don't even know we're doing it, but we naturally just, you know, we categorize people. We put them in little cubicles, and this is just who you are. This is what you are, and this is all you're gonna do. So, you know, once we can break those barriers, that allows us to be like, oh, we're just all the same. We're good. You can do that. That's okay. That's okay to me. That doesn't bother me.
I agree. I don't know about you, but I think the most moving story that I heard on the panel for psychedelics was the story of the U.S. Navy SEAL veteran. So, like, obviously, like, you know, a few of us had some psilocybin stories to tell. And, you know, granted, my story wasn't, you know, like a combat veteran healing story or anything like that. I never went to combat. A couple of the men ahead of me, they were combat vets and they had healed from psilocybin, which is incredible. But
I just want the audience to know that Emma was on the panel for the Hope for Heroes conference at the Cannadelic Expo. So she is referring to her time on that panel. One of the other panelists shared their story.
yeah, so this particular panelist, he was a Navy SEAL vet, and I could be wrong, but I feel like I remember him saying he served 4 years and did like 130 something tours.
I believe he did more than 4 years. It may have been either 12 or something like that, or 14. Maybe it was 14.
So obviously it was way more than 4 years. So that's
Oh,
where
yeah.
I don't remember, right? But,
It's okay.
But I think tours wise, I mean, he did.
He did 4 tours, is what I think I heard.
No, that man did like 100 and something.
Okay,
missions.
I have it recorded on my phone. We'll have to.
Well, yeah, we'll fact
Go
check
over
it.
that,
But
yeah.
I remember just going like, holy shit, like you've been out there a lot. I mean, maybe it was like 4 tours and 130 something missions within those tours or something. So I could be wrong. We'll fact check it. But
Yeah.
I mean, basically, this guy got all messed up, right? I mean, just like when you could think of like the craziest PTSD, like from what he was describing, he had that. And after he got out, he moved to New York City, which he said was like the stupidest thing he could have ever done. It's like the most stimulating environment. And when he was out there, you know, obviously like his PTSD was like exacerbated, and he got into drinking and cocaine and using those, you know, unhealthier coping mechanisms, which, you know, again, coping with that type of stress is something that I could never even come close to imagining, right? That poor man. But, you know, that's how he found a way to cope. And he said that at one point he was walking in the city with his girlfriend and he heard a cab backfire, and it scared him so bad that he threw her to the ground and got on top of her to like protect her, thinking they were getting attacked. But he did it with such force that he like ripped her arm out of the socket or something like that. And she was like all upset, like, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you crazy? And, you know, in his mind, he's like, I'm trying to protect you. I'm sorry. Like we could have gotten killed or bombed or whatever. And he said like, kind of like that was his moment where he was like, all right, like maybe I'm a little more fucked up than I thought I was. And so he tried ayahuasca, which, for those of you who don't know, ayahuasca is another type of psychedelic. It's traditionally done in like a ceremonial environment. And so you go and you prepare the drink. Ayahuasca is actually 2 different leaves. It's the DMT leaf with another leaf, which causes the DMT to like have like a longer half-life, so like last longer in your system. And he said the ayahuasca helped him, but didn't cure him. Right? Like it kind of helped him like realize some things, but it didn't give him, you know, exactly what he was looking for. So
A catalyst.
yeah, exactly. And so from there he went and he did a psychoassisted therapy with ibogaine. And ibogaine is like, he said ayahuasca is about a 7 on the intensity level, but ibogaine was like 10 out of 10. And this poor man tripped blindfolded for 30 hours. And he said he sat through, and it was the hardest 30 hours of his life because he re-experienced every single trauma that he hadn't been able to move on from. And he said, you know, at one point I was just getting so overwhelmed by what was going on in my head that I took off my blindfold thinking I could escape it. And all I wanted to do was put the blindfold back on and get back to it. And he said he came out of that 30-hour trip perfectly fucking fine. Like, perfectly fine.
It's a warrior right there.
Right? Like, are you kidding me? Like, this man, like, from what he was saying, like, he would have been the poster child of PTSD, right? And he's fine now. And to me, like, that goes to show, like, the true potential of this stuff, right? I mean, like, not to say that like sexual assault isn't as severe as combat, because, you know, like it's severe in its own ways and it's traumatizing in its own ways depending on the environment. But to hear someone who's experienced that much trauma so consistently and got that derailed from it, snap back and be a totally functioning person of society, I mean, that's incredible. You don't hear about stuff like that in normal pharmaceutical environments, you know? Like, therapy helps and medicine helps kind of like numb things, but it doesn't cure it. It doesn't make you feel okay and safe and normal again like psychedelics do.
I will say that if you can find that light at the end of the tunnel, you are no longer a member of society. You are now a leader of society, because you have information and insight that can help so many people around you. This man that we speak of, he may not even think of himself in high regard, but just him looking at the ground and talking in a transic state, just getting himself back into that mental state that he was in during this time, he changed the life of everybody in that room. And that's the power of what we have in the military. We have that inside of us just by speaking our truth. We don't necessarily have to have an intention for it. We can be spaced out in a trance, just talking on a tangent, and that can totally have an effect on everyone that's around you. And when you come back to reality, you look over and everybody's jaws are on the ground and there's tears in their eyes.
Oh my God, everybody was crying. I mean, that man's story was the most moving story I have personally ever heard in my entire experience in holistic healing. I mean, it was life-changing for me. After hearing his story, I was like, oh my God, I need to start talking about this more. Like, I talk about psychedelics casually and like about, stuff, that I'm doing in the industry and stuff from a professional standpoint, but I haven't really gotten into like my storytelling side like I did with cannabis in the beginning. And hearing that man's story like really inspired me, like, okay, no, we need to start having these conversations, especially as veterans, right? Veterans, we are taught from basic training, community is everything, right? So why is it when we get out of the military, we lose that sense of community, right? A lot of us get back into the civilian world and we're not anywhere near anybody that we served with. And, you become lost. You're like, where are my brothers and sisters? It's a shell shock, like you get into that, civilian environment again and you're like, oh my God, where am I? And so by being able to gather people together who have all experienced similar trauma, and it might not be exactly the same degree or anything like that, but everybody has experienced some kind of trauma, especially as a veteran. And to be able to gather veterans together and just share stories and make them realize that, hey, you're not alone. And not only are you not alone, there's hope for you. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like as veterans, we get a short end of a lot of sticks. And people want to slap whatever awards they can on us and make us feel good about ourselves, but that doesn't mean we're actually getting the right attention and the right tools in our toolbox in order to, transition back into normal civilian society, if you want to call this normal. And that's what I thought personally was just so beautiful about that panel at Cannadelic was we had, I think, 6 of us sitting on the stage and we all told our stories. And the only 2 that didn't have personal stories were medical professionals who were able to speak on behalf of their patients. And, before the veteran panel, I did a marketing panel. And after that, I got a lot of people coming up to me afterwards. But after that veteran panel, I was crying from people's stories. I mean, these vets were coming up to me. I had one vet tell me that they got their hearing back with psychedelics, right? Just all of these stories. And you could tell these people had never been able to voice this or ask these questions. They've never had that safe environment to be a part of. And I just remember feeling like, oh my God, we could really change a lot of people's lives if we just have the correct conversations. And so when you asked me to be a part of this podcast, I was like, I didn't even ask questions. I was like, yes, I want to come and I want to talk about my story, because even if it's just one person who listens to it and gets moved by my experience, that's enough for me. You know what I mean? Because you don't know who they could have a conversation with and how that can continue to go down the line. And so, I mean, I think veterans don't realize that all it takes is one moment to feel like you're a part of that community again, and it's just figuring out how to take that chance again, like you did when you enlisted or when you signed up to be an officer.
I think the biggest thing with the military is you kind of get told that people are going to have your back. And it's instilled in you like, yo, I got you. I got your six. You don't have to worry about that. That's my job. So you get out, you're like, okay, I can handle everything in front of me. But everything to my left, right, and rear, I can't handle that. That's too much for me. I need other people to take care of that for me. And that's why a lot of people don't want to be, progressive, or they don't want to do things that require a large amount of commitment. A lot of veterans get depressed. They overexert themselves because they don't have people around them be like, yo, I can handle this. You do that. I got it. We don't have that. So we don't have a way of slowing down. And with that, once you find that community of people that are like, yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about. You're like, what? I talk to all these people. Nobody understands what I'm talking about. How can you understand? Like, because I do it too. I live it too. Like, that's my life. Like, I'm the one that's staring off in a trance, completely disattached from where I am right now. That's me. That's my life.
Space cadet.
Space cadets. Like that's what I live. So if you're telling me about that, I'm like, yeah, I do that too. What are you talking about? Oh, you go back and you get goosebumps every time you walk around a public situation. Oh, me too. I deal with that too. Oh, like you pay attention to people's hands and their feet and their eyes, and it makes you lose track of what they're talking about. Oh, me too. I do that too. Like, I'm sorry, I'm hypersensitive, hyper-aware, hypersensitive. I look into people's actions before I look into
their body language.
Yeah, their body language, your energy. What are you coming to my space with? What's in your hands? Are you trying to hide something? And then the whole time you're talking with them, you're trying to figure out what's their avenue. What are they trying to get out of me? It just makes you highly critical over every single situation, and that's not beneficial for civilian society.
No, not at all. And I think that's something that you see quite frequently in the cannabis space. And so I'm very, I'm hoping that that type of environment doesn't transition into the psychedelic community, because psychedelics are I love cannabis, right? Like, I am like the number one advocate for it, but I think psychedelics need to be held with a different type of like sacredcy, right? They've been involved in traditional, medicine for so long, and they have, I think if you take psychedelics, you understand where I'm coming from this, because they're a lot more. But, I think that as a young veteran, and especially so I was afraid for the longest time. I never spoke about being a veteran, right? Nobody knew. Still to this day, I have people who I've been working with for 5 years now that come up to me and they're like, Emma, I had no idea you were a vet. And I'm like, because I don't project it, because I don't want to feel like people think that I'm using that as my platform, right? Like, yes, I'm a veteran and I'm proud of it. But also I have a lot of other attributes about me. But I was also nervous to talk about being a veteran because I didn't get out of AIT. I didn't get deployed. And so to me, I'm a diet vet, right? Even though I am 80% disabled through the VA, to me, it wasn't the same. And so being in the cannabis community, where the intentions of the individuals within the community aren't always as pure as you would expect them to be, and then getting active into a veteran community again and feeling that sense of comfort and family and accepted, they're accepting of whatever weirdness, that's what I've missed. You know what I mean? You could truly be yourself around veterans, because we've learned, hey, I don't care who you are, as long as your intentions are right and you're on the same mission that I'm on, then we can vibe. We can be, a part of this community together. And I think that psychedelics could be just incredible for veteran communities, because we're already caring for each other and providing for each other that safe space and everything like that. And I think psychedelics can just kind of be like the little cherry on top.
I hope people understand that if you do start kind of experimenting and trying these new psychedelics, you're going to see that there's a wide variety of different effects that are available out to you. The ibogaine that Emma was referring to for that Navy SEAL veteran story, it's a very male energy. So what he was speaking on was that even though he didn't want to face some of these traumas in his past, it forced him to do it. It was a very aggressive in that sense that he didn't have a choice. Now, some of these ayahuasca, that's a mother energy. That's a mothering type of trauma dealing and treatment. So there's different ways that you can kind of tread that field. That doesn't necessarily have to be the one hit knockout.
One thing that was said on the panel that I thought was just so great, and it doesn't really make sense, but it does. Someone asked, like, as a veteran, how do you know what psychedelic to use, right? Like, which one do I take? Do I take shrooms? Do I do ayahuasca? And I think we all just kind of looked at each other and agreed on the fact that whenever you're ready for psychedelics, the right one will present itself to you, right? And I think that's what really happens. I just think it's like a very spiritual thing. I think I'm a very spiritual person. I believe that everything happens for a reason, and the universe has your back in a lot of situations. And if the universe puts some type of psychedelic, like if you're starting to get curious, like let's say you listen to this podcast and you start thinking like, oh my God, maybe I should try psychedelics or something. And I guarantee you in the near future, you're going to have some type of opportunity, whether it be with shrooms or ayahuasca or ketamine even, right? Ketamine and MDMA, those are more controlled environments when it comes to psychoassisted therapy, but it'll come your way. Whatever one's right for you, I believe, will present itself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Just as well, if you seek, you shall find. So
Yeah.
You have to allow yourself to be open to receiving treatment or receiving information. A lot of us close ourselves off, and that's kind of where it's like, oh, no, that's the line. Sorry. You're on that side. I'm on this side. That's you. This is me. And kind of we need to bridge that gap. That's actually one of the biggest things of the purpose of this podcast is to help bridge the gap between the veteran community and the service members and the civilian community. Because us as veterans, we try and problem solve our own issues. But there's so many civilians that are specialists and are wanting to support us. They just don't know how. And once you can bridge that gap, it allows us to actually get the treatments and, have the necessary facilities to really make a change in our day-to-day. I would like to ask you, what are your plans for the future? What are you going to be getting into here that we can be looking out for and really get excited?
So my goal for this year is to just start bringing together the right people, right? I've done a lot of networking in the past 5 years, and it's my favorite thing about my job is just meeting new people, hearing their stories, learning from their experience. I'm a firm believer that every person you meet is a lesson to be learned. And so this year, I think it's time for me to start picking from all of my baskets and placing the right people together. So I'm hoping to be putting together some events. Specifically, I want to do more women-focused events, just because as a female in the industry, as a younger female in the industry, like my goals is to be a leader, even more so than I already am. And I really would like to be a trailblazer. And there's not a lot of female leadership in cannabis or psychedelics. I mean, I think there's more in psychedelics than there is cannabis, but I actually read something the other day that said the percentage of female executives in cannabis is actually declining. And I get it, right? I totally understand why this is a very male-dominant environment. It's very toxic. It's, some of the most interesting people I've ever met are in the cannabis industry. But to me, that hurts my heart as a female, as someone who just really thinks that women can be just game changers in this industry. And we've already seen it in quite a lot of different, people's experiences. So for me, my goal is to start empowering women a little bit more in this space and giving them the encouragement to be leaders or to get involved in this industry and kind of, add fuel to the fire, because I love this industry, and it's definitely not perfect, but I think that the female perspective and experience can change quite a lot in it as long as those conversations are held. So one of my goals for this year is to start bringing empowerment back to women in this space, because we need it, and I think there's quite a lot of opportunity here. And then also I want to get more involved in the storytelling of psychedelics. So one of the things that I do, I mentioned to you before the podcast, like I don't have a real job because I do a lot of like contract work. I don't have a 9-to-5. And one of the things that I do is like I do like social media influencing or whatever, if you want to call it that. But it's just more of a creative way. I'm a creative. I like to, storytell, like I've said 15 times already. And so I want to start shifting my focus from just cannabis into other forms of treatment that can help you. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be psychedelics. Like I've been cutting out meat and animal products and stuff from my diet because, not that I'm against eating meat. I just think that nowadays, there's just like so much antibiotics and chemicals and stuff in our foods that I'm trying to, eat more plant-based and more local produce and stuff, to hopefully set myself up for success. And that has helped my mental health and everything like that. So I want to just empower people this year, I think is the overall summary, because again, after that panel, man, I was just ready to go.
It was definitely a very incredible way to bring in the year.
I agree.
And I think, especially for you with that type of vision, half the battle is just seeing somebody in that position of authority. I mean, seeing somebody there, you're like, oh, I could do that. Mm-hmm. Just that, just being able to say, oh, I could do that might be the only thing that somebody needs to actually go and, make that happen. And if you do that, I think all you're doing is creating more opportunities for people to relate, and more opportunities for people to say, oh, that's something that I could see myself doing, which is so important, especially for women. Women have been kind of put into the corner, and every time they voice themselves, it's like, okay, well, a man says it louder.
Yeah.
So because he says it louder, we're going to take care of the crying baby first. Mm-hmm. I would like to ask you, do you have any kind of like mantras or sayings that you live by that you really feel that our audience could benefit? Or stories.
One thing that I try my best to live by, and granted, I'm not perfect, and so it doesn't happen all the time, but I really like to believe that everything in life is an energy exchange, right? So if you're putting out good energy, you're going to be getting good energy back. And if you're putting out negative, you're going to get the negative back. And so, I try, like every single day, when I wake up, I write 3 things that I'm grateful for. I write 3 goals for the day, and then I write 3 manifestations. And then every night before I go to bed, I write 3 more things that I was grateful for. And some days it's as silly as, I'm grateful for my dog giving me cuddles today, or, I'm grateful that I brushed my hair, or whatever it is, big or small. But it's just, I think that the grass can always be greener. It always can be greener. And I don't give a shit if someone says it's green where you water it. Yeah, it is. But in reality, like, it could always be greener somewhere else, right? And so I think it's very important to just kind of take a step back and be grateful for where you're at, and just keep positive energy and positive vibes out, because you are going to attract what you put out. And, like my mom, God love her, I love her to death, but she's a negative Nancy. You know what I mean? And it's just like one thing after another. And like I asked her, I'm like, why? Like, can't you just start looking at the good? Like, once you start looking at the good and thinking positively and stuff like that, your brain's going to change. Your brain is a muscle. And if you're not exercising that muscle, then you're doing it an injustice. And to me, that's just all about positive vibes and positive, energy, because you never know what someone's going through. And you never know when you might go through something similar in the future. And so I just think it's good to just, cross your T's, dot your I's, and make sure that you're taking care of the community, in the most capable way that you're possible.
Yeah, wow. That's really some incredible,
Good knowledge and wisdom.
there. Great knowledge and wisdom. Dan, do you have anything kind of you want to like to say to the audience before we kind of close things out?
Yeah. Military, veteran community, civilians just as well. If you see the light at the end of the tunnel, move towards it. Don't ever let go. Keep on keeping on.
And we all like the sunshine. You know what I mean?
Well, the sun's good for us.
It's so good for us. It's not nice to be in that dark place. And a dark place can definitely be comforting in some aspects, but, think about how good you feel on a tropical vacation. You know what I mean? Like, every now and then you want to get out of the snow and go feel the heat, so.
Well, yeah, when your throat's dry, you want to drink water. So, water yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, my God. You gave me this platform to tell my story, and, hopefully it's going to change some lives. I think it will. Well,
the goal is to just allow you to speak because you are incredible in the community. You have so much going for you. You've done so much. And this is a place where I want to highlight that. I want you to feel like you're making a change because people are looking at you as the example. You are the one who has been here from the very beginning of the whole cannabis experience in Florida. And people are going to be looking to you as, this now grows and becomes hopefully a recreational thing that we can start implementing in, daily life. I really hope everybody here watching or listening that you were able to relate to something, that you could pull a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of information here and there and kind of create your own type of motivation, or at least feel some type of relation to what we're talking about. There's so many people out there that are capable of changing their community, and I want people to feel that they can take their darkest of their dark and use that and wield it and use that to create light and positivity in their community. This has been a great second episode, and I hope everybody here keeps tuning in and really starts understanding that we're here to stay and we're going to make a big change in this world. So this is Core Values, and tune in next time, and we look forward to seeing you.